While more than three-quarters of AP departments have some form of automation, few have an actual standardized process. The reality is, the way that many businesses have gone about automating their AP processes is, quite frankly, wrong. They often deploy standalone systems to fix one issue instead of addressing the entire AP cycle. I'm Scott Leahy, and this is Esker On Air. Today, I'm welcoming on Joanna Honoré. It's her first time on the podcast, and she is here to help with the discussion around automating AP processes. Why not to automate a bad process, and how to turn a bad process into a good one? Joanna, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Scott. Glad to be here.
So, as mentioned before in the intro, we're here to talk about why it's important to not automate a bad process. So let's start with the obvious there. Why is it important to identify if you have a bad process before we begin that automation conversation?
Great question. Well, it's essential to identify if you have a bad process before automating, because automation can only really amplify the current state of your processes, right? So if your process is inefficient or inconsistent, automating it will just speed up these issues and can lead to even greater inefficiencies and potentially costly mistakes, right? So essentially, you need a solid foundation before you can successfully implement automation and reap all the benefits.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. For those companies listening in that, maybe they're thinking they might have a bad process that, shouldn't be automated yet. How are companies able to identify a bad process?
Identifying a bad process involves a lot of things, starting with evaluating your current operations, looking for specific signs of inefficiency. Some indicators of bad processes can include, lost or misrouted documents, approvals based on institutional knowledge rather than standardized procedures, approvals that include people just because of their role, not because they provide value in the process, missed payment deadlines, lack of visibility, so on and so forth. So there's so many things, compliance and fraud issues. Additionally, you can assess the maturity and consistency of your process, and that's crucial. Companies should be looking for consistency in decision making and how well their processes align with overall organizational goals and innovation.
Yeah, I caught the word maturity in there earlier. Can you explain a little bit about what process maturity is and maybe why that is so significant?
Yeah, process maturity typically refers to how well defined and controlled a company's processes are. So, as well as whether or not it has had time to be tried and tested, right? Or, a mature process is documented, understood by employees, and continuously assessed and improved. There's high process maturity, and that's significant in this case because it ensures that automation can be effectively implemented, leading to consistent and reliable outcomes. There's so many projects I've heard of that, if if we don't have high process maturity, we're going down a road of trying to fix issues on an individual level. So, we're brought into situations where organizations would rather not take the time to ensure they have that maturity prior to starting the project, and it has a snowball effect on the overall effectiveness of the project.
Okay, so let's say a company has identified their bad process or the parts of that process. What then should be the steps they take to change that process?
Yeah. There are, tons of things you can do, but I would say there's several really strategic steps you should take. Well, first, you need to get strategic alignment, right? You have to ensure that your process improvement goals align with those in other departments like finance and procurement. So you're in for AP specifically to avoid redundancies as well as identifying where process and project obstacles are, maybe even in the form of naysayers to the project and where those exist. Second, I would say putting a governance team in place to oversee and enforce process change is pretty crucial. That team is basically your source of truth for how the policies and processes align and how the solutions are designed and implemented. So that team should consist of people from every department in the process that it touches. Third, when you've identified the process, to instead go visualize the entire process from start to finish, and that can help in identifying bottlenecks and areas that you're going to need to improve prior to automating. Just a couple more, stick with me. Fourth, managing change effectively by capturing best practices and lessons learned, and then prioritizing necessary training for staff. This is a big one. If you've done all this work to fix what's wrong, but your staff doesn't fully adopt the changes, then the project could fall apart and or the solution won't ever really be fully optimized, and you won't get the full value from the investment that you've made in the solution. So finally, in fifth, continuously applying what's learned and comparing performance targets with peers. It helps in the ongoing improvement and ensuring the process remains effective. Of course, there may be some egg in the face moments when certain people realize that the ideas or decisions that they put in place are part of the problem. That's okay. That's all part of growing and adapting as an organization, as you know. We have to embrace those moments as turning points that can lead you closer to your goals.
Well, yeah, very comprehensive list there. All good stuff. And so now that you've identified the bad processes, you've changed them. Uh, Now, why is automating a good process so beneficial here?
Yeah, it's beneficial because it maximizes the efficiency and effectiveness of your operation. So when a process is well defined and consistent, then automation can help ensure real-time visibility into operations, enforcing standardized controls, capturing those key performance or KPIs and metrics, key performance indicators, leads to more time for staff to focus on those value add activities and strengthening internal and external relationships rather than those repetitive manual tasks that automation take over. So essentially, automation can help you achieve higher productivity, cost savings, and better overall performance and employee satisfaction, especially when the underlying process is solid, has that solid foundation.
Okay, well, finally, final question for me here. What are some of the key takeaways for our listeners regarding process automation?
Yeah, I guess my key takeaways would be to always start by assessing and improving your current processes when you consider automation. Ensure you have process consistency and, like you said, process maturity, so you're avoiding simply speeding up an inefficient operation. And that can end up costing you more in time and resources in the end. So automation should be seen as a tool to enhance a well-defined process, not as the sole fix for any existing problems that you have in the process. If you invest the time in improving your processes first, you'll have better results, high return on investment when you do end up implementing automation. And then continuous assessment, like I said before, and improvement are crucial to maintaining effective and efficient operations in the long term. So being able to admit when something went wrong so you can adjust and make better decisions is definitely part of that and important.
Great. Well, thank you, Joanna, for joining today. It's much appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to be here. Thanks.
And if you have any questions or are interested in the ebook that this podcast was based on, check the links in the show notes. And as always, if you're interested in learning more about Esker, you can find us at esker.com. Thanks for tuning in today, and we'll talk to you next time.